The room was suffused with a cold, artificial glow from the sprawling holomap dominating the central table. The faint hum of its mechanisms filled the air, a subtle undertone to the oppressive silence. Chancellor Ethan Vane stood motionless, his reflection warped in the polished black surface of the table, his mind racing despite his outward calm. Outside the reinforced windows of the United Earth Government Command Tower, the bustling sprawl of New Terra stretched out like a living tapestry of light and movement. Yet tonight it felt subdued, as though the entire planet held its breath. A sharp chime broke the silence, followed by a mechanical voice. "Incoming priority message from the Galactic Council." Ethan's jaw tightened. He had been waiting for this. He adjusted the lapel of his tailored dark suit, a practiced motion more out of habit than vanity, and nodded toward his assistant. The young officer tapped a command, and the room darkened further as a hologram flickered to life. The emblem of the Galactic Council materialized first, an elaborate interlocking of stars and geometric shapes meant to symbolize unity, though to Ethan it now felt like chains. Then the figure of Counselor Lauren Vrax solidified, the alien's elongated insectoid form shimmering with an unnatural iridescence under the Council's sterile lighting. Lauren's compound eyes caught the light, giving them a predatory gleam. "Chancellor Vane," Lauren began, his voice a clicking symphony, carefully modulated for translation. "The Galactic Council has convened. We have reached a decision." Ethan's heartbeat quickened, but he kept his face impassive. "I'm listening, Counselor." "Humanity's failure to contribute adequately to the Galactic Compact cannot go unaddressed," Lauren said, his tone dripping with condescension. "The resources of Earth and its colonies are vital to the galaxy's continued prosperity. Effective immediately, the Council will oversee their extraction." Ethan clenched his fists behind his back, his nails digging into his palms. "Earth is a sovereign world. We have adhered to the Compact in good faith, despite its uneven terms. This overreach violates every principle the Council claims to stand for." Lauren emitted a sound that might have been a chuckle. "Sovereignty, Chancellor. How quaint. The Compact is clear. The needs of the many outweigh the desires of the few. This is not a negotiation. It is a courtesy notice. Prepare your world for our arrival." The hologram dissolved, leaving a lingering blue haze in the air. Ethan exhaled slowly, forcing his shoulders to relax. He turned toward his assistant, who was already clutching a data slate, her face pale. "Alert the Council," Ethan said quietly. "Emergency session. Now." Minutes later, the Situation Room roared to life. The air was thick with tension, the scent of fresh brewed coffee mingling with the acrid tang of overworked machinery. Military officials, scientists, and political leaders filled the chamber, their voices colliding in an uneasy symphony of concern and outrage. The holomap now displayed a stark rendering of the solar system, alien ships marked in red dots encroaching on its periphery. Admiral Carter Rourke stood at the head of the table, his tall frame casting a long shadow over the hologram. His voice was a deep, measured growl as he addressed the room. "The Galactic Council has made their move. We intercepted faint signals 2 days ago. Council fleets are massing near Proxima Centauri. They're pushing us to surrender," said General Elise Terran, her tone sharp. "We should have seen this coming." "We did," Rourke replied, "and we prepared." Ethan entered the room and the chaos stilled. All eyes turned to him as he moved with deliberate calm to the head of the table. His gaze swept the room, locking briefly with each key figure. Rourke gave him a slight nod of acknowledgement. "Chancellor," Dr. Alric Dane, Earth's leading xenopolitics advisor, began cautiously, "this escalation was inevitable. But if I may suggest, diplomacy isn't dead yet. We can delay, stall for time." "No," Ethan said, his voice steady but firm. "There's no stalling. Not this time. They've made their intentions clear: submission or annihilation." The room fell silent, the weight of his words pressing down like an anvil. The only sound was the faint hum of the holomap, its glowing lines tracing the paths of impending doom. Ethan turned to Rourke. "Tell me about our defenses." Rourke's face was a mask of grim determination. We've fortified the Lagrange stations and armed the Martian colonies, but our real advantage lies in the black projects. He tapped the console and the hologram shifted to display a massive network of hidden assets, cloaked shipyards in the asteroid belt, stealth satellites armed with kinetic projectiles, and Earth's crown jewel, a fleet of experimental warships hidden in deep space. We call it the Shadow Fleet, Rourke continued, his voice carrying a note of pride. Advanced stealth capabilities, AI-assisted combat systems, and weapons they won't see coming. The room murmured with approval, but Ethan's expression remained stony. And if they breach the inner system? Rourke hesitated. We'll fight tooth and nail, but if they bring their full force, it'll cost us. Dr. Dane interjected, his tone urgent. Then we can't afford to abandon diplomacy entirely. A war with the Council won't just risk Earth, it could destabilize the entire galaxy. Destabilize? Ethan's voice rose slightly, the steel in it unmistakable. They've already destabilized it. They've exploited us for decades, treating us as a resource hub while masquerading as allies. We've bent, we've negotiated, we've compromised, and now they've decided we're expendable. He stepped closer to the table, his shadow cutting across the glowing hologram. But they've forgotten one thing. Humanity doesn't break. The room erupted in applause, the tension morphing into resolve. Even Dane nodded, albeit reluctantly. Ethan gestured to Rourke. Prepare the Shadow Fleet for deployment. Coordinate with our allies, discreetly. If there's dissent within the Council, we need to know. Rourke saluted. Understood, Chancellor. Ethan turned back to the table, his voice quieter now, but no less forceful. We'll give them one last chance for peace. But if they choose war... He let the words hang, their implication clear. The soft hum of the holomap seemed to echo his unspoken vow. Later that night, Ethan stood alone in his private quarters, staring out at the stars. The glass was cool against his fingertips, and the faint vibrations of the bustling city below seemed almost disconnected from the infinite silence above. He could feel the weight of the moment, 1,000 invisible threads pulling him toward a decision that would shape humanity's destiny. The words of Lauren Vrax echoed in his mind. The needs of the many outweigh the desires of the few. Ethan's lips curled into a bitter smile. You're about to learn what happens when you underestimate the few. Ethan stood at the observation deck of the United Earth Command Tower, the expansive view stretching into a canvas of black night punctuated by glittering city lights. The distant rumble of transport shuttles cut through the faint hum of the tower's systems, a constant reminder of the world's unrelenting activity. The sky above, scattered with stars, seemed colder tonight, as if the galaxy itself had turned its back on humanity. He drew a deep breath, the recycled air tinged with the faint metallic tang of the tower's filtration systems. His mind churned with the weight of decisions that could change the fate of his people forever. The sharp hiss of the sliding door behind him broke his reverie. Admiral Carter Rourke entered, his boots striking the floor with a deliberate cadence. His weathered face was shadowed, the dim lighting casting deep lines that etched his determination into his features. They've crossed the Rubicon, Rourke said without preamble, his voice carrying the gravel of years of command. Proxima Centauri is no longer just a staging ground. Our recon drones show active fleet movements heading toward the inner colonies. They're not waiting for negotiations, Chancellor. Ethan turned slowly, his face unreadable. How much time? Days at best. They're coming with enough firepower to make a statement, but not enough to destroy outright. They think they'll intimidate us into compliance. Rourke allowed himself a thin, humorless smile. They don't know what we've been building. Ethan motioned toward the data console in the corner, where Rourke keyed in commands. The room dimmed further as the holographic table lit up, displaying a detailed schematic of Earth's secret preparations. A lattice of stealth bases in the asteroid belt flickered to life, their locations hidden behind Decoy mining operations. Ghostly outlines of cloaked warships patrolled the edges of the solar system, their sleek, angular designs bristling with weaponry. Operation Iron Veil, Rourke said, his tone reverent, the culmination of decades of planning, These ships are more than a countermeasure, they're our edge. Their cloaking tech makes them undetectable to anything the Council has. And the payloads, his voice trailed off, the weight of their destructive power unspoken. Ethan leaned closer, studying the holographic ships as though committing their details to memory. The hum of the display filled the silence, a faint undertone to his steady breathing. How many know the full scope? Only those who need to, Chancellor. The fewer who know, the better. The Council has spies everywhere. Ethan nodded, the sharp lines of his face carved deeper by the glow of the map. Good. And the colonies? Martian defense grid is online but limited. Europa is fortified but sparsely manned. If the Council pushes hard enough, we'll lose both. The words hung in the air, bitter and undeniable. Ethan stepped away from the table, his hands clasped behind his back. What about civilian evacuation? We've prepared contingencies, Rourke said, his voice softening. But the reality is, if they hit us hard, we'll lose people. A lot of them. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, the weight pressing against his chest like an iron vise. The thought of families, children, caught in the crossfire was almost unbearable. But war didn't spare the innocent. It devoured them without remorse. Chancellor, Rourke's voice pulled him from his thoughts. There's something else. Ethan turned, his eyes narrowing. What? Rourke hesitated, then keyed another command. The holographic display shifted to reveal a fleet of alien ships, sleek, ominous, and unmistakably unfamiliar. They're not Council, Rourke said grimly. These signatures are from a coalition of fringe worlds. Pirates, mercenaries. The Council's hedging its bets. The revelation twisted in Ethan's gut like a knife. They're outsourcing? More like hiring vultures to pick the bones clean. If these fleets join the Council's main forces, we'll be overwhelmed. Ethan clenched his jaw. Then we make sure they never join. Rourke tilted his head, studying the Chancellor's expression. You're planning a preemptive strike? Ethan's voice was cold as steel. I'm planning to send a message. Hours later, Ethan descended into the bowels of the command tower, where the hum of machinery grew louder, and the air carried the acrid scent of oil and heat. The restricted hangar stretched out before him, its expanse filled with the sleek forms of Earth's most advanced ships. Engineers moved with purpose, their tools glinting under harsh floodlights. The atmosphere was alive with the sharp hiss of welding torches and the rhythmic clank of metal. Commander Malik Thorne stood near the lead vessel, his imposing figure silhouetted against the illuminated hull. His dark eyes gleamed with sharp intelligence, and the faint scars on his face spoke of battles hard won. Chancellor, Thorne greeted, his voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of tension. You're here to see the fleet? I'm here to see the future, Ethan replied, his gaze sweeping across the ships. And you're going to make sure it works. Thorne allowed himself a faint smirk. They're ready. Cloaking systems have been stress-tested, weapons are calibrated, and the pilots are the best we've got. Good, Ethan said, stepping closer. The ship's hull was cool to the touch, its surface absorbing light like a predator hiding in the shadows. You're heading to the asteroid belt. When the Council's mercenaries arrive, I want them neutralized before they can even form up. Thorne nodded. Consider it done. What about the Council's main fleet? Rourke's handling the front line, Ethan said, his voice firm. Your mission is surgical. Eliminate the fringe threats, disrupt their supply lines, and keep them guessing. Thorne grinned, the faint glint of adrenaline flickering in his expression. We'll make it look like the void swallowed them whole. As Thorne prepared to depart, Ethan lingered in the hangar, his gaze fixed on the departing ships. The hum of their engines grew louder, a low vibration that resonated in his bones. This was humanity's gamble, a desperate bid to prove they weren't prey. Back in the command tower, the situation room was alive with the frenetic energy of preparation. Ethan re-entered to find Rourke and his team coordinating the deployment of the Shadow Fleet. The holomap now displayed projected movements of both enemy and allied forces, their paths converging like the strands of a spider's web. Chancellor, Rourke said, looking up, everything is in motion. But there's still the matter of the Council's diplomacy. Ethan met his gaze, his expression hard. They'll get their chance. But if they think we'll kneel... He let the words trail off, his silence more powerful than anything he could say. Outside, the stars gleamed coldly against the black expanse of space, their light a distant promise of hope or a warning of battles yet to come. Ethan turned to the holomap, his voice quiet but resolute. They wanted to see what humanity could do. They're about to find out. The void of space was a serene predator, its silence vast and unbroken. At the edge of Earth's solar system, that silence was shattered. The alien fleet arrived with precision and malice, their ships slicing through the darkness like daggers glinting under a distant sun. Their hulls reflected faint, ominous shades of gold and black, their designs elegant, yet brimming with lethal intent. From the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Carter Rourke surveyed the incoming swarm with grim determination. The steady hum of the ship's engines resonated through the deck plates beneath his boots. The faint scent of ozone filled the air, a reminder of the weapon systems warming up to full readiness. "Status report," he barked, his voice carrying over the subdued chatter of his officers. The command deck buzzed with activity, holoscreens flickering with streams of tactical data. "They've crossed the Kuiper Belt, Admiral," Commander Era Lorne replied, her fingers flying over her console. "First wave is approximately 3 hours from Mars. Scans confirm 4 dreadnoughts, 2 carriers, and an escort fleet of at least 50 smaller vessels." Rourke's jaw tightened. "They're testing us." "And if we don't respond?" Era asked, glancing up at him. "They'll take it as an invitation," he said darkly, his eyes fixed on the glowing red markers inching closer on the tactical map. The alien fleet's lead ship, Valkith's Wrath, sent out a ripple of energy, a visible distortion that warped the stars behind it. The shockwave reverberated across the void, a silent declaration of power. On board the Indomitable, the tremor registered as a faint vibration, setting every nerve on edge. "They're charging weapons," one officer called, his voice tense. "Projected targets. Martian orbital defense platforms." Rourke's lips thinned. "Not on my watch. Initiate protocol eclipse. Activate the decoys." Across the asteroid belt, dormant machinery awoke with calculated purpose. Long hidden stations, disguised as abandoned mining outposts, began emitting energy signatures designed to mimic military installations. Beacons pulsed brightly, drawing attention like fireflies in the dark. The alien fleet faltered, their formations shifting as they recalibrated targeting systems. "They're diverting," Era said, her voice tinged with cautious relief. "They're focusing fire on the decoys." The holographic display of the asteroid belt flared with a simulated barrage. Alien energy blasts streaked across the expanse, pulverizing rock and debris into incandescent showers. But the real targets remained cloaked, their true positions hidden among the chaos. Rourke allowed himself a thin smile. "Good. Let them waste their firepower. Prepare our first strike. Silent approach." The bridge dimmed further as the Indomitable activated its cloaking systems. Around it, a dozen sleek warships followed suit, their angular designs fading into the shadows of space. The hum of the engines softened, replaced by the faint hiss of electromagnetic dampeners, suppressing emissions. Meanwhile, Mars prepared for the inevitable. On the surface, the Martian defense grid flickered to life, massive railgun installations humming with lethal potential. Soldiers in exosuits moved with rehearsed precision, their boots crunching against the red dust as they loaded ordnance and calibrated targeting systems. At Olympus Mons base, General Elise Taryn stood before a command console, her eyes scanning incoming data streams. The faint scent of iron-rich soil mixed with the sterile tang of recycled air, a sharp reminder of the fragile line between survival and devastation. "General," one of her officers called, his voice tight with urgency, "we have visual confirmation of the second wave. 36 more ships inbound." Elise's stomach churned, but her voice remained steady. "Do we have targeting solutions?" "Affirmative. Defense grid is locked." She nodded. "Hold fire until I give the order. Make every shot count." Above the planet, the first wave of alien ships emerged from the asteroid field, their hulls glowing faintly from residual energy discharges. The largest ship, Valkith's Wrath, led the charge, its prow a menacing blade cutting through the void. Inside the Wrath, Commander Jorath Valen observed the unfolding battle with cold precision. His reptilian features were impassive, but his slitted eyes gleamed with satisfaction. The humans had resisted, but their decoys betrayed a certain desperation. They were hiding something, but no matter. Soon the full weight of the Council's might would descend upon them. "Prepare to breach Mars' atmosphere," Jorath ordered, his voice guttural. "Deploy ground forces once the defenses are neutralized." As the alien ships closed in, the Martian defense grid roared to life. Railgun rounds accelerated to near-light speeds, slamming into enemy vessels with devastating force. Explosions bloomed like silent supernovas, fragments of shattered hulls scattering into the void. "Direct hits!" one officer shouted on Elise's command deck, a rare note of triumph breaking through the tension. But the celebration was short-lived. The Wrath retaliated with a beam of searing plasma that cut through the thin Martian atmosphere like a scalpel, vaporizing a section of the defense grid. The ground trembled, and the base's lights flickered as the shockwave rippled outward. "Damage report!" Elise barked. "Orbital platform Alpha 6 is down," her lieutenant replied. "Casualties unknown." Elise gritted her teeth. "Redirect power to the remaining platforms. Keep firing." Above the chaos, the Indomitable and its fleet emerged from their cloaked positions. Silent and deadly, they maneuvered into flanking positions around the alien forces. Targeting reticles aligned, and for a moment, the universe seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a synchronized burst of energy, Earth's fleet unleashed hell. Railguns fired with thunderous precision, their kinetic slugs punching through shields and ripping into the hulls of alien ships. Torpedoes streaked across the void, their detonations consuming entire formations in brilliant flashes of light. The Wrath shuddered as its aft section erupted in flames, its shields failing under the onslaught. Inside the alien flagship, Jorath staggered as the ship's stabilizers faltered. How did they get this close?" he roared, his voice a mix of fury and disbelief. Earth's ships didn't relent. The Indomitable led the charge, its railguns hammering at the alien fleet's core. The tactical map on Rourke's command console painted a picture of utter devastation. Enemy ships broke formation, their cohesion shattered. "Press the advantage," Rourke ordered. "Target their carriers, cut off their reinforcements." One by one, the alien carriers were disabled, their fighters left adrift and powerless. The Wrath, its engines crippled, began to retreat, its remaining escorts scrambling to cover its withdrawal. "Admiral," Era said, her voice sharp, "they're falling back." "Let them," Rourke replied, his eyes still fixed on the tactical display. "We've made our point." As the alien fleet limped away, the battlefield fell silent once more. The wreckage of shattered ships floated like dark monuments to the carnage. On Mars, the faint glow of fires dotted the horizon, casting eerie shadows across the red sands. In the aftermath, the tension aboard the Indomitable didn't ease. The crew moved with somber efficiency, their faces pale but determined. Rourke stepped away from the command console, his gaze distant. "They'll be back," he said quietly. Era nodded. "And stronger." Rourke exhaled, his breath heavy with the weight of what was to come. "Then we'll be ready." Far from the battle, in the depths of space, another fleet stirred, larger, more advanced, and bound by a singular purpose. The Council wasn't finished, not by a long shot, and as the next phase of their plan unfolded, humanity's gamble was about to face its greatest test. The Indomitable moved through the wreckage like a shark circling its prey. The vast expanse of ruined alien ships stretched out before it, silent and lifeless in the cold void. Fires still flickered on the carcasses of some vessels, casting a dim orange hue across the darkness. Admiral Carter Rourke stood on the command deck, his arms crossed over his broad chest, as the faint scent of overheated electronics mingled with the sharper tang of disinfectant in the recycled air. His eyes were sharp and calculating, scanning the battlefield for answers amid the chaos. "They retreated too quickly," Rourke muttered, his gravelly voice breaking the tense silence. Commander Era Lorne stood beside him, her posture rigid as her gaze flicked across the holomap. It wasn't a rout. It felt deliberate, like they were testing us. Exactly, Rourke said, his jaw tightening. This wasn't their full strength. They wanted to gauge our capabilities. Era frowned, her fingers tapping against her console. Which means the real fleet is coming. This was just a prelude. Rourke nodded grimly. And we need to make sure their overconfidence leads them straight into our hands. He turned to the tactical display, where Earth's defenses were illuminated in a faint blue glow. The Martian defense grid was still operational but severely weakened, while Earth's cloaked assets remained hidden, their positions marked only on classified internal schematics. The asteroid belt, a seemingly chaotic mess of rock and debris, concealed Earth's most ambitious gamble. "Patch me through to the Shadow Fleet and Olympus Mons Command," Rourke ordered. His voice carried the weight of command, sharp and unwavering. A second later, the screen split into two, displaying the calm but intense faces of Commander Malik Thorne and General Elise Terran. Behind Thorne, the dimly lit command center of his flagship flickered with holographic overlays of alien ship positions, his crew moving with synchronized precision. On Elise's end, the gritty, sand-blasted interior of the Martian base reflected her no-nonsense demeanor. "Admiral," Thorne began, his voice clipped, "we've completed sweeps of the asteroid belt. The decoy installations are primed and emitting false energy signatures. Any fleet that enters the sector will assume they've found key targets." "Good," Rourke replied. "What about your ships?" "Cloaked and holding position. Once the enemy commits to the decoys, we'll cut their escape routes. If they want to retreat, they'll have to run through us." Elise leaned forward, the faint hum of her tactical console audible through the feed. "Mars is battered, but we're still in the fight. Our remaining orbital platforms are loaded with precision ordnance, and the ground-to-space cannons are on standby." Rourke's gaze shifted to the map, where alien fleet projections blinked ominously near the edge of the system. "Here's the plan. When their main fleet arrives, they'll see what they expect to see: an overextended defense grid, scattered forces, and an asteroid belt full of vulnerable installations. They'll commit to a full-scale assault, focusing on the decoys." Thorne's lips quirked into a faint smile. "And while they're playing target practice, we hit them from the shadows." "Exactly," Rourke said. "Mars will draw their attention with a controlled counteroffensive. When they engage, the Shadow Fleet will cut off their supply lines and pick off their support ships. We want them trapped, disoriented, and unable to regroup." Elise nodded, her expression steely. "And when they realize they've been played?" Rourke's voice hardened. "That's when we unleash everything." The channels closed, leaving Rourke and Era alone with the faint hum of the ship. Era's brow furrowed as she studied the map. "It's a solid plan. But if even one element falters—" "We can't afford to falter," Rourke interrupted, his tone unyielding. "The Council sees us as an upstart species, a thorn in their side. If we don't break their momentum here, they'll crush us." The Admiral's words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truths. Humanity was standing on a precipice, its survival dependent on the gamble unfolding across the system. Far from the Indomitable, the Shadow Fleet maneuvered silently through the asteroid belt. The ships, their hulls painted in non-reflective black, seemed to absorb the faint starlight. Inside the lead vessel, Commander Malik Thorne paced the command deck, his sharp eyes darting between the holographic displays and the asteroid field outside. The faint vibration of the ship's engines hummed beneath his boots, a constant reminder of their readiness. "Status report," Thorne barked, his voice cutting through the quiet tension. "Decoy installations are live and emitting," his tactical officer replied. "Cloaking systems are stable. Enemy projections estimate arrival in 4 hours." Thorne exhaled slowly, the weight of anticipation pressing down on him. "Good. Keep us in the shadows. The moment they commit, we pounce." Meanwhile, on Mars, General Elise Terran stood atop the battered ramparts of Olympus Mons base, the biting wind carrying the acrid scent of scorched metal and charred earth. Below her, the defense grid hummed with restrained power, railgun turrets swiveling in silent anticipation. Her second-in-command approached, his face lined with fatigue but his voice steady. "General, reports indicate enemy reinforcements are larger than expected. Do we have enough to hold?" "We don't have to hold forever," Elise said, her eyes narrowing as she watched the horizon. "We just need to hold long enough." As the hours ticked by, the alien fleet surged into the system. Their ships spread out in a calculated formation, targeting the decoy installations with ruthless precision. Energy blasts and missiles illuminated the asteroid belt in violent bursts, the explosions scattering debris in every direction. On board the Valkith's Wrath, Commander Jorath Valen observed the destruction with a grim smile. "Their defenses are weaker than expected. Press the advance. Crush their outposts." As the alien fleet moved deeper into the system, the trap began to close. The Shadow Fleet emerged from the asteroid belt, their stealth systems dropping as they surrounded the enemy. Railguns fired with surgical precision, ripping through alien ships with devastating efficiency. Torpedoes streaked through the void, their detonations scattering the enemy formation. The aliens scrambled to regroup, their disciplined movements unraveling under the onslaught. On Mars, the defense grid roared to life, railgun rounds and plasma cannons slamming into the enemy's forward elements. The ground shuddered with each impact, the air thick with the acrid smell of ozone and fire. Inside the Indomitable, Rourke watched the battle unfold, his expression unyielding. "Target their command ships," he ordered. "Cut off their leadership and let the chaos spread." One by one, the alien dreadnoughts faltered, their shields collapsing under the relentless assault. The Valkith's Wrath was left exposed, its engines sputtering as human ships closed in. "Admiral," Era said, her voice sharp, "the fleet is breaking." "Good," Rourke replied, his eyes never leaving the map. "Now we finish this." As the battle reached its climax, the alien fleet's retreat turned into a rout. The once imposing armada was reduced to scattered remnants, their cohesion shattered by humanity's precision and resolve. But even as the last enemy ship disappeared into the void, Rourke's gaze remained fixed on the map. "This was just the opening move," he muttered. "The real war starts now." The battlefield had fallen silent, but only for a moment. The shattered remnants of the alien fleet drifted like broken marionettes, their hulls blackened and fractured. The eerie quiet was deceptive, a pause in the orchestra of chaos before the next symphony of destruction. Admiral Carter Rourke stood at the command deck of the Indomitable, his sharp eyes scanning the tactical hologram that pulsed faintly before him. The tension in the air was palpable, a taut wire ready to snap. Era Lorne, her features lit by the glow of her console, broke the silence. "Admiral, we've intercepted enemy transmissions. They're regrouping in the Lyrae expanse. Multiple reinforcements inbound." Rourke's jaw tightened, the weight of her words settling on his shoulders like lead. "They won't wait long before launching a full-scale retaliation," he said, his gravelly voice even. "This is our moment. If we strike now, we control the tempo." Era nodded, her fingers flying across her console. "Shadow Fleet is holding position near the asteroid belt. Mars reports the defense grid is stable, but ammunition reserves are low. Olympus Mons Command recommends deploying auxiliary units to resupply." Rourke nodded, his gaze sharpening as he formulated the next phase. "Forget defense. Activate Phase 2 of Iron Veil. It's time we show them that humanity doesn't just survive. We dominate." A low murmur rippled across the command deck, the crew bracing themselves for the enormity of what was to come. Rourke turned to the communications officer. "Open a channel to all command units." The officer nodded, and moments later, the deck filled with the faint static of open comms. Rourke's voice cut through like steel. "This is Admiral Rourke. The enemy thinks we're fractured, scrambling to defend scraps of territory. They're wrong. We've lured them into the web, and now we strike. Every unit, every ship, every soldier, you've trained for this moment. Show them what Earth is capable of." The message ended, but its impact lingered. The crew moved with renewed determination, their motions precise and deliberate, the hum of the ship's systems rising in a synchronized rhythm. The Indomitable surged forward, engines flaring like twin suns, leading a formation of Earth's finest warships. Far from the command deck, In the cold recesses of deep space, the Shadow Fleet waited. Commander Malik Thorne paced the bridge of his flagship, the Eclipse, his footsteps a measured cadence on the reinforced metal floor. The faint scent of coolant filled the air, mingling with the sharp tang of oil. The bridge was dimly lit, its primary illumination coming from the glowing tactical displays surrounding him. "Enemy reinforcements entering the system," his tactical officer reported, her voice steady but tense. "2 carriers, 8 cruisers, and a command ship. They've brought firepower." Thorne's lips curled into a predatory smile. "So have we. Cloak systems status." "Fully operational, Commander. We're invisible." "Good," Thorne said, his voice low. "Maintain silent running. Let them think the battlefield is theirs." As the alien fleet advanced, their ships formed a tight phalanx, a wall of impenetrable armor and energy shielding. The Eclipse and its sister ships drifted in the shadows, their engines dampened to avoid detection. The hum of the cloaking devices resonated faintly through the hull, a constant reminder of the razor's edge they walked. "Commander," the tactical officer said, her voice cutting through the quiet. "They're scanning. Their sensor sweeps are wide but not focused." "They're looking for ghosts," Thorne muttered. "Let's give them something else to find." He tapped a command into the console, and a cluster of drones detached from the Eclipse, their sleek angular forms glinting faintly as they moved into position. These weren't ordinary drones. They were equipped with advanced ECM modules, designed to scatter enemy targeting systems and create phantom signatures. "Deploy the decoy swarm," Thorne ordered. "Make it look like we're spread thin." The drones activated, their signals blooming across the alien fleet's scanners. Red warning lights flared on the tactical displays, showing false ship positions that seemed to encircle the Council's reinforcements. The alien ships hesitated, their formation breaking as they adjusted to face the perceived threat. "Now," Thorne said, his voice sharp, "drop the cloak and fire all forward batteries." The Eclipse materialized from the void like a vengeful specter, its railguns roaring to life. Kinetic rounds tore through the closest alien cruiser, its shields collapsing in a brilliant cascade of energy. The rest of the Shadow Fleet followed, emerging from their hidden positions and unleashing a torrent of firepower. The alien formation disintegrated under the onslaught. Ships that had once seemed invincible now burned in the cold vacuum, their hulls twisted and shattered. Thorne's bridge vibrated faintly with the recoil of the guns, the scent of scorched metal mingling with the acrid tang of superheated plasma. "Target the carriers," Thorne commanded. "They're the backbone of this fleet." Torpedoes streaked across the void, their trajectories precise and unerring. The lead carrier erupted in a chain reaction, its ammunition stores igniting in a blinding flash that lit the entire sector. The second carrier attempted to retreat, its engines flaring, but a volley from the Eclipse severed its propulsion, leaving it adrift. "Enemy command ship is isolated," the tactical officer reported. "Their escorts are gone." Thorne's smile widened. "Finish them." The Eclipse and its fleet converged on the command ship, their weapons reducing it to glowing fragments in moments. The alien reinforcements were obliterated, their once mighty presence reduced to nothing more than debris. On Mars, General Elise Terran stood atop Olympus Mons base, her expression grim but resolute. The faint glow of the distant battle lit the horizon, casting flickering shadows across the red sands. Her earpiece crackled with Rourke's voice. "Shadow Fleet has neutralized reinforcements," Rourke reported. "Mars is clear for now." "Understood," Elise replied, "but we're running low on resources. If the Council sends another wave—" "They won't," Rourke interrupted. "Not yet. They need time to regroup." Elise exhaled, her breath misting in the frigid Martian air. "Then we use that time to prepare." She turned to her officers, her voice cutting through the wind. "Resupply the platforms. Rotate the crews. I want us ready for anything." As the soldiers moved to follow her orders, Elise looked toward the horizon, her jaw tightening. The Council wasn't finished, and neither was humanity. On board the Indomitable, Rourke leaned against the edge of the command console, his gaze fixed on the tactical map. The enemy's primary reinforcements had been obliterated, their plans thrown into disarray. But this victory, as decisive as it was, felt like a prelude to something far greater. They'll come back, Era said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of shared understanding. Stronger. Angrier. Rourke nodded, his expression hard. And we'll be ready. As the ship hummed with the quiet rhythm of preparation, Rourke turned his gaze to the stars beyond the viewport. They seemed colder now, distant and unfeeling. But amid that endless void, humanity's fire burned brighter than ever. The Indomitable drifted through the void like a solitary predator, its angular hull glinting faintly in the starlight. On the bridge, Admiral Carter Rourke leaned forward over the tactical table, his eyes scanning the dense clusters of holographic data. The faint hum of the ship's systems was punctuated by the occasional chime of incoming reports. Each sound heightened the tension that had settled like a thick fog over the crew. Era Lorne broke the silence, her voice low but urgent. Admiral, long-range sensors have detected a massive influx of ships emerging from hyperspace. 2 sectors out. It's the Council's primary fleet. The holomap updated, casting the bridge in shades of crimson as a sprawling formation of red icons materialized. Rourke's gaze narrowed as he studied the enemy's movements. The alien fleet was vast, dreadnoughts flanked by cruisers, their formation bristling with precision and power. Even from a distance, it exuded a palpable menace. "How many?" Rourke asked, his voice sharp. "Over 200 confirmed vessels," Era replied, "and more signatures keep appearing. They're converging toward the asteroid belt." "They're consolidating," Rourke muttered. "They want to overwhelm us in one decisive blow." A quiet tension settled over the bridge, the weight of the enemy's numbers pressing down on the crew like an invisible hand. Rourke straightened, his voice cutting through the unease. "This is what we've been preparing for. Patch me through to all commands." The communication channel activated with a faint hiss, and Rourke's voice carried across the fleet. "This is Admiral Rourke. The Council is bringing their full might against us. They want us to crumble, to scatter. But we won't give them that satisfaction. Every ship, every soldier, you're part of the greatest coordinated defense humanity has ever built. Stay focused, stay disciplined, and trust in your training. We'll show them what it means to face Earth." The faint echo of acknowledgments filled the channel before it cut off. Rourke turned back to Era. "What's the status of our allies?" Era's fingers flew over her console. "The Martian defense grid is back to 80% operational capacity. Olympus Mons reports additional ordnance secured from emergency stockpiles. The Shadow Fleet is holding position in the belt, cloaked and waiting." "And the Fringe World alliances?" Era hesitated. "Unclear. We've received scattered messages of support, but nothing definitive." Rourke frowned. "We need those alliances. Without them, we're fighting an uphill battle." The hum of the bridge was interrupted by a burst of static from a secondary channel. A new voice, rough and unfamiliar, crackled through the comms. "This is Commander Vress of the Free Lyroth Consortium. Your gamble caught our attention, humans. We're sending 5 squadrons to your location. Let's see if your reputation is earned." Era glanced at Rourke, a flicker of surprise in her expression. "That's one," she murmured. Rourke nodded, his mind already turning over the possibilities. "It's a start." In the asteroid belt, Commander Malik Thorne stood on the bridge of the Eclipse, the tension in the room thick enough to choke. The faint scent of lubricants and ozone filled the air, mingling with the hum of cloaking devices working overtime to conceal the fleet's position. Thorne's gaze was fixed on the holomap, where the incoming alien armada blazed like an inferno of red. "Commander," his tactical officer said, her voice taut, "enemy fleet is deploying reconnaissance drones. They're sweeping the belt for our decoys." Thorne's lips tightened into a grim line. "Let them find what they're looking for." He keyed a command, and across the asteroid belt, dormant mines began to stir. Each mine was equipped with electromagnetic pulse emitters designed to detonate in a cascading wave that would disrupt communications and disable shields. The mines activated in sequence, their faint energy signatures baiting the enemy drones closer. The first drone approached an asteroid cluster, its sleek form weaving through the jagged debris. As it neared the mines, The faint hum of a priming sequence filled the silence. "Detonate," Thorn ordered. The explosion was silent in the vacuum of space, but its impact was devastating. A ripple of energy expanded outward, enveloping the drone and its companions. Their systems flickered and died, leaving them adrift. "Chain reaction complete," the tactical officer reported. "2 cruisers in the vicinity were caught in the blast. Their shields are down." Thorn allowed himself a tight smile. "Good. Begin Phase 2. Redirect fire to their flanks." Across the asteroid belt, cloaked ships dropped their stealth fields and unleashed precise volleys of railgun fire. The first salvo slammed into the alien fleet's flanking vessels, ripping through hulls and igniting secondary explosions. The enemy's formation began to falter as ships scrambled to cover the sudden breach. On board the enemy flagship Zeverick's Judgment, Commander Karesh snarled, his scales rippling with frustration. "Where is their fleet?" he roared. "They're ghosts, striking from the shadows." An officer cowered before him, his voice trembling. "Their tactics are unconventional. We cannot pinpoint their position." Karesh's claws dug into the armrest of his command chair. "Then flush them out. Deploy frigates into the belt. Force them to engage." On Mars, General Elise Terran paced the control room of Olympus Mons base, her boots striking the metal floor with measured force. The faint vibration of the defense grid's weapons hummed through the walls, a low, almost comforting rhythm. "General," her second-in-command said, "long-range sensors show the enemy is repositioning. They're trying to flank the asteroid belt." "They're trying to draw out the Shadow Fleet," Elise replied. "We won't give them that chance. Send a message to the Eclipse. Inform them Mars will provide covering fire." Moments later, the Martian defense grid roared to life, railgun slugs streaking across the void to intercept the alien forces. The shots struck true, scattering the enemy's forward elements and forcing them into a disorganized retreat. "Keep up the pressure," Elise ordered. "We need to buy the Shadow Fleet as much time as possible." The Eclipse moved through the chaos with deadly precision, its railguns and torpedoes carving through the enemy like a scalpel. Thorn stood at the center of the bridge, his expression one of grim focus. "Commander," his tactical officer said, "we've identified the enemy flagship. It's moving to reinforce their center." Thorn's eyes narrowed. "It's a gamble. If we take out their flagship, their chain of command collapses." The tactical officer hesitated. "It's heavily guarded." "I didn't ask for easy," Thorn snapped. "Plot a course. We're taking it down." The Eclipse accelerated, weaving through the battlefield as enemy fire erupted around it. The ship's shields flared with each impact, but Thorn's crew held their course. As they closed in on the flagship, Thorn gave the final order: "Fire everything we've got." The Eclipse unleashed a devastating salvo of torpedoes and railgun rounds, each shot aimed with pinpoint accuracy. The flagship's shields flared and failed, its hull buckling under the relentless assault. Inside the Zeverick's Judgment, Karesh bellowed in fury as the bridge erupted in chaos. "We've underestimated them," he snarled. "Fall back. Regroup." But it was too late. The Eclipse delivered the killing blow, a final torpedo piercing the flagship's core and igniting a chain reaction. The resulting explosion lit up the void, a beacon of Earth's determination. As the enemy fleet began to retreat, Thorn's voice crackled over the comms. "Admiral, the flagship is down. The rest are scattering." On board the Indomitable, Rourke allowed himself a rare smile. "Well done, Commander. Let's keep the pressure on." The first phase of humanity's retaliation had succeeded, but the war was far from over. The Council's forces were vast, and their resolve unyielding. Yet for the first time, the galaxy saw humanity not as prey, but as a predator ready to claim its place among the stars. The void of space simmered with latent energy, littered with the wreckage of ships that had once been heralds of Galactic Council dominance. The remnants of the Council fleet scattered like broken dreams, their fractured hulls drifting aimlessly, illuminated by the distant light of 1,000 indifferent stars. Inside the Indomitable, the air buzzed with an electrified tension that felt almost palpable, as if the ship itself were holding its breath. Admiral Carter Rourke stood at the center of the bridge, his shadow long and sharp against the glowing tactical display. The faint hum of engines and the rhythmic cadence of distant console beeps filled the space around him. The faint scent of warmed metal and ozone clung to the recycled air, a reminder of the battle just concluded. His steel blue eyes locked on the pulsating red markers of the Council fleet's retreat. "Admiral," Commander Era Lorne began, her voice tinged with urgency. "New intel from the Shadow Fleet. Scouts report enemy reinforcements gathering at the Kepler Nexus, a force at least triple the size of the one we just faced." Rourke exhaled sharply, his shoulders tensing. "They're desperate. This is their endgame. If we don't stop them there, they'll regroup and counterstrike. And if they entrench themselves at Kepler," Era added, "we'll lose the momentum. Their supply routes will stabilize and they'll grind us down." Rourke nodded, his mind already racing. "Then we don't give them the chance. We hit them first, and we hit them hard." He turned to the communications officer. "Patch me through to all command units." The bridge dimmed as the communication channel came to life, and the faint static crackled before Rourke's voice resonated across the fleet. "This is Admiral Rourke. The Council's last hope is to regroup at the Kepler Nexus. If they consolidate their forces, this war drags on, costing more lives, more resources, more of everything we've bled to protect. That won't happen. We take the fight to them, and we finish this. Prepare for an immediate advance." Acknowledgments came in rapid succession, voices laced with determination. Rourke cut the comms and turned back to Era. "What's the status of our allies?" Era glanced at her console. "The Lyroth Consortium squadrons are holding position near the asteroid belt. We've also received confirmation that 3 independent fleets from neutral worlds are willing to commit to the assault. Their technology isn't as advanced as ours, but they'll bolster our numbers." "Every ship counts," Rourke said. "Deploy them strategically, flanking positions only. We'll take the vanguard." A subtle vibration rippled through the ship as the Indomitable prepared to engage its slipstream drive. Across the fleet, the hum of activation echoed like a rising tide, each vessel poised for the coordinated jump. The tactical map shifted, displaying the Kepler Nexus, an expanse of interconnected hyperspace routes critical to the Council's logistics. "Kepler Nexus," Era murmured, her voice tinged with awe. "The most fortified point in this quadrant." "Fortified," Rourke echoed, his tone sharp, "but predictable. They think strength alone will save them. Let's remind them that it takes more than numbers to win." The Kepler Nexus loomed like a shimmering web in the void, its hyperspace gates glowing faintly against the darkness. The Council fleet was vast, a daunting armada of dreadnoughts, carriers, and cruisers, arrayed in layered defense formations. Their hulls gleamed under the faint light of nearby stars, bristling with weaponry. On the bridge of the Zavaric Ascendant, the Council's temporary flagship, Commander Valthis Ra observed the incoming data with clinical precision. The reptilian commander's yellow eyes flickered as holographic projections painted a picture of calculated invincibility. "They won't dare attack us here," Ra hissed to his officers, his voice reverberating through the chamber. "Their forces are too few. We hold the gates, and their rebellion dies in this system." "Commander," one officer interjected, his voice trembling slightly. "Human forces are advancing. Their fleet is larger than anticipated." Ra turned slowly, his gaze sharp as a blade. "Let them come. We will remind them why they are merely scavengers on the galactic scale." The Indomitable emerged from slipstream like a predator stalking its prey, followed by the full might of humanity's armada. The fleet glided into position, their formation disciplined and precise, a stark contrast to the chaotic wreckage they had left behind at the asteroid belt. Railguns gleamed in the faint starlight, and torpedoes sat primed in their bays, ready to be unleashed. Inside the Indomitable, the tension on the bridge was palpable. Every officer's movements were sharp, their focus unwavering. The air carried the faint tang of adrenaline, a collective readiness that hummed like a second heartbeat. "Deploy Phase 3, Rourke ordered, his voice calm but charged with intent. Across the fleet, drones swarmed into action, their sleek forms weaving through the void with predatory grace. Each drone emitted false signals, mimicking the energy signatures of full-sized warships. The decoys moved ahead of the fleet, scattering across the enemy's sensors like an approaching storm. On board the Zivaric Ascendant, alarms blared. "Multiple enemy contacts detected," an officer shouted. "Their formation is irregular. Over 100 ships." Commander Ra snarled, his claws digging into the console. "They're trying to intimidate us. Maintain formation. Prepare to fire at will." The Council fleet opened fire, energy blasts streaking across the void, but the drones evaded with uncanny precision. As the decoys drew the enemy's attention, Earth's fleet moved into position, their cloaked vessels slipping past the defensive line unnoticed. "Fire all forward batteries," Rourke commanded. The first volley from the Indomitable was devastating. Railgun rounds tore through an enemy cruiser, its shields collapsing in a brilliant cascade of energy. The explosion sent debris scattering, a silent storm of destruction. "All units, engage," Rourke ordered. The battlefield erupted into chaos. Human ships moved with lethal precision, their weapons punching through Council formations. Cloaked vessels struck from the shadows, delivering devastating hits before disappearing into the void. The Lyroth Consortium's squadrons flanked the enemy, their nimble craft harassing the larger dreadnoughts and forcing them to divert fire. On the Eclipse, Commander Malik Thorne directed the Shadow Fleet with surgical precision. "Target their supply vessels," he ordered. "Cut their fuel lines. Starve them." Torpedoes streaked across the void, striking the Council's logistics ships. Explosions rippled through their ranks, severing the lifelines that sustained their formidable armada. Inside the Zeveric Ascendant, panic began to spread. "Our supply lines are compromised," an officer cried. "We're losing formation cohesion." Commander Raha's composure cracked, his claws gouging the console. "How are they outmaneuvering us? Focus fire on their flagships." But Earth's fleet was relentless. The Council's defenses, though formidable, were designed for conventional engagements. Humanity's unconventional tactics exploited every weakness, turning the battlefield into a masterclass of asymmetric warfare. As the Council fleet faltered, Rourke saw the opportunity. "Send in the vanguard," he ordered. "Break their center." The vanguard ships surged forward, their weapons blazing. They carved a path through the enemy's core, shattering their command structure. The Zeveric Ascendant was left exposed, its shields flickering as human railguns pounded its hull. On board the Zeveric Ascendant, Commander Ra's voice was a desperate snarl. "We've underestimated them. Initiate retreat." His words were cut off as a torpedo pierced the ship's core. The resulting explosion lit up the battlefield, a silent crescendo to humanity's audacious strike. As the last remnants of the Council fleet fled into the void, Rourke stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, his gaze fixed on the retreating ships. The battlefield was theirs, but the war was far from over. "Admiral," Era said quietly, "we've won this engagement. But the Council still has resources. They'll regroup." Rourke nodded, his expression hard. "Let them. They've seen what we're capable of. Now the galaxy will decide who they stand with." In the cold silence of space, humanity's defiance burned brighter than ever. The stars burned cold in the vast emptiness of the void, their light indifferent to the fate of those who fought beneath their eternal gaze. The wreckage of the Council fleet lingered like ghosts in the aftermath of humanity's decisive strike, the twisted remnants of mighty dreadnoughts and cruisers orbiting the ruins of the Kepler Nexus. On board the Indomitable, Admiral Carter Rourke stood silent at the bridge, his face carved from stone as the final tactical report streamed in. "Admiral," Commander Era Lorne said softly, breaking the tense quiet, "all Council forces have retreated beyond the Nexus. Their supply chains are severed, and their fleet strength is halved. We've won this battle." Rourke's eyes didn't waver from the holographic display. The retreating red markers of the Council's remaining ships blinked further and further out of range. Yet the unease in his chest remained, a heavy presence that wouldn't abate. "Have we?" he asked, his voice low but edged with steel. He gestured to the map, where the fractured galaxy lay bare before them. "They'll regroup, rearm, and strike again. They won't stop until they break us, or we break them." Era hesitated, then asked the question no one dared voice. "What's our next move, Admiral?" For a moment, the bridge held its collective breath. The faint hum of the engine seemed louder in the silence, the cold air brushing against the skin like a whisper of warning. Rourke finally turned to Era, his gaze unyielding. "We take the fight to them," he said, the words like a thunderclap. "No more waiting for them to strike. No more reacting. We carry the war into their space and dismantle the foundation of their power." A ripple of shock passed through the crew, but it was accompanied by an undeniable spark of resolve. Era's expression tightened, her lips pressing into a determined line. "You're talking about an offensive." "I'm talking about ending this," Rourke said, his voice rising with conviction. He stepped forward, his presence filling the room. "They've underestimated us from the start, treated humanity like prey to be picked apart. It's time we showed them who we are, what we are. No more playing by their rules. We'll rewrite the rules of this galaxy." His words hung in the air, heavy and irrevocable. The crew exchanged glances, their earlier fatigue melting into a shared purpose. This wasn't just survival. It was a statement, a declaration that humanity refused to kneel. Era nodded sharply. "What's the plan?" Rourke moved to the tactical display, his fingers deftly manipulating the controls. The map shifted, zooming out to reveal the heart of Council-controlled space. Dozens of systems blinked red, their interconnectivity a lattice of power and control. "We've spent decades studying their infrastructure," Rourke said. "Every choke point, every vulnerability. This isn't just a fleet war, it's a war of logistics, of morale. We'll hit them where they least expect it." He pointed to a cluster of systems near the galactic core. "Their central command is here, at the Naravan Cradle, the hub of their governance, their economy, their military coordination. It's heavily fortified, but they won't expect us to strike so deep, so soon." Era raised an eyebrow. "And how do we get past their outer defenses?" Rourke's lips curled into a faint, dangerous smile. "We've been building a backdoor for years. Far beyond the Kepler nexus, in the cold reaches of the Naravan Cradle, the Galactic Council reeled from the reports flooding in. The central chamber, an opulent spire of polished obsidian and glimmering energy conduits, pulsed with heated debate. The air vibrated with tension as alien diplomats and military leaders shouted over one another, their voices a chaotic symphony of panic and anger. "We cannot let this stand," roared Karresh, a reptilian commander whose scales bristled with fury. "Their insolence must be crushed, their species made an example." Counselor Valtis Ra, his composure frayed but unbroken, raised his voice above the cacophony. "And how do you propose we do that, Karresh? Half our fleet lies in ruins, our supply lines are severed, and our allies are deserting us by the day." The chamber fell silent as Ara's words cut through the noise. The gathered council members exchanged uneasy glances, the enormity of their predicament sinking in. For so long they had believed themselves untouchable, their power absolute. Now they faced a foe unlike any they had encountered, a species that fought with ferocity and ingenuity born from centuries of struggle. "The humans," one counselor murmured, her voice trembling. "They are not what we thought. We assumed them weak, primitive. We were wrong." Before anyone could respond, alarms blared through the chamber, bathing the room in harsh red light. A holographic projection materialized in the center of the room, displaying an approaching fleet. The ships were sleek, black shadows against the backdrop of stars, their forms unfamiliar, yet unmistakable. "It's them," an officer stammered, his voice tinged with disbelief. "The humans, they've breached the cradle's outer defenses." Panic erupted anew as the reality of the situation struck home. The Council had always assumed that any assault on the cradle would take months of preparation, that no species could possibly muster the audacity or resources to strike at the heart of their power. Yet here humanity was, defying every expectation. On board the Indomitable, the bridge was a hive of controlled chaos as the fleet closed in on the Naravan cradle. The tactical display pulsed with data, enemy ships scrambling to intercept the advancing human armada. Rourke stood at the center, his voice calm but commanding as he issued orders. "Target their defense stations first," he said. "Disable, don't destroy. We're not here to level planets. We're here to dismantle their grip on this galaxy. Era relayed the orders, her tone sharp and precise. Across the fleet, railguns roared to life, their kinetic rounds slamming into the cradle's outer defenses with pinpoint accuracy. Energy shields flared and collapsed, leaving the stations vulnerable. Precision strikes disabled weapon platforms and power grids, rendering the once impenetrable stronghold defenseless. The Council's fleet surged forward, but their formation was fractured, their coordination unraveling under the relentless assault. Human ships moved with surgical precision, their tactics honed by years of asymmetric warfare. The Council's dreadnoughts, massive and lumbering, were outmaneuvered at every turn. Inside the Council chamber, Valthis Ra watched the battle unfold with growing despair. "This is impossible," he muttered. "How did they learn our weaknesses?" A new holographic feed appeared, displaying a transmission from the Indomitable. Rourke's image filled the chamber, his expression hard as iron. "You thought humanity was an afterthought," Rourke said, his voice echoing through the room. "You called us scavengers, primitives. You believed we'd break under your heel, but you forgot one thing: humans don't break. We endure, and when pushed, we push back harder." His gaze swept the chamber, a storm behind his eyes. "This isn't just a fight for Earth. This is a fight for every species you've oppressed, every world you've stripped bare. Your reign ends here." The transmission cut out, but its impact lingered. The Council chamber fell silent, the weight of Rourke's words sinking deep into every being present. As the battle reached its climax, the Council fleet broke apart, its remaining ships fleeing into the void. The Naravan cradle, the heart of their empire, lay vulnerable. On board the Indomitable, Rourke stood at the bridge, his gaze fixed on the tactical display. "We've done it," Era said quietly, awe in her voice. Rourke shook his head. "This is just the beginning." Humanity's message had been sent. The galaxy would never be the same. Earth had risen, not as a conqueror, but as a force to be reckoned with, a beacon of defiance and resilience. When pushed to the brink, humanity had shown the galaxy its true nature. They had stopped being nice, and the galaxy would never forget.